Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create a better bunting brush in Illustrator. In my earlier video, we ended up with some distortion in the bunting that we created, and this video shows you how to create a better brush using a different technique to make sure that the bunting isn't distorted and remains its triangular shape. Before we get started on the solution to our bunting problem, let's just have a quick look at what the bunting problem was in the first place. I've created a bunting pattern brush here from these little triangles over here, and this is my pattern brush. Now when I draw a line in Illustrator, let's actually just select this one and get rid of it, and let's draw a line in Illustrator using the pen tool, and I'm going to put quite a bend on this line because I want you to see the issue that we're having with this brush. So with the line created, I'm just going to click on the brush to apply it to the line. And you can see here that these triangles aren't triangles any longer. This one's billowed out, so it's got really bendy sides, and these are all sucked in. So the pattern brush is really not dealing very well with bends in this line. And that's fine if that's the effect that you want. If you want your bunting to look like this, then just watch the other bunting video and you're off and running. But if you want a solution to this problem, as many of my viewers have actually asked for and that I have promised to give you, then that's what we're going to do here. We're going to solve this bunting problem, and we're going to get evenly shaped triangles all the way along this line. For the solution to our bunting problem, let's create a new document. I'm just using one that's 960 pixels by 560. It doesn't really matter how big your document is. We're going to grab the line segment tool. I'm just going to click once on my document, and I want to create a line that is 25 pixels long at an angle of 0 degrees. I'm just going to click OK, and that's just this mini little line in the middle of my document. Now I'm going to create a pattern brush from this. So I'm going to click here on the brushes panel. I'm going to take this little line here and I'm going to drag and drop it into the brushes panel. I'm going to create a pattern brush and click OK. Now we get the specifications for our pattern brush, and what we want to do here is set it to a fixed size. So we're just going to choose fixed, and if we want a space between our pieces of bunting, I can type in here 5%, and that'll give us 5% of our 25 pixel line will be added as a space between these bunting pieces. But you don't have to put any at all if you don't want to. The only other brush setting that we're going to deal with right now is this one. We're going to set it to tint so we could recolor this bunting later on, and I'll click OK. So we now have a pattern brush, so I'm going to create a line here for my bunting. So I'm just dragging it out with the pen tool, and I'm going to select this line and I'm going to duplicate it, because once we've finished our bunting, we'll want to put a string that it's all attached to. So I'm going to choose Edit Copy and Edit Paste in Place. And I'm just going to Layers Palette, which I don't have, so let's just go and display it. And I'm going to hide one of these paths. So we've just hidden the one that we're not going to use right now. So I'm going to select the visible path. I'm going to apply my brush to it. Now if the spacing we're seeing here is not enough, since we can now see it in situ, I'm going to click here on the options of selected object, and I can just increase the spacing to, for example, 10% if I want my little pieces of bunting to be separated a little more than they are right now. So we have a line that has a brush applied to it. So what we're going to do next is we're going to expand this, which is Object, Expand Appearance. And that breaks this up into lots of little lines. And we'll choose Object, Ungroup. And so what we have now is a set of little lines, every one of which we can apply a brush to. So let's go and make a bunting brush. I'm going to click on the Polygon Tool here. I'm going to click once in my document, set the sides to 3 and the radius to 50 pixels, and click OK. Now I can just make this into something that looks a little bit more like a piece of bunting. Let's just rotate it, holding the Shift key as I do, so it becomes a proper upside down nice triangle. And let's fill it with black with no white border at all. Anytime I move or scale it, I want to hold the Shift key because I want this in nice proportions. Before I create a brush from this, I need to add another piece to the top so that the brush is going to be lined up along the lines and not over the lines. So I'm going to take this shape and I'm going to alt drag a duplicate of it away just so that we get the exact same size shape here. And I can squeeze this one up because it doesn't matter because we're only going to use this as a sort of space marker. So let's just select this shape and let's make it no fill, no stroke. So we have two pieces here and we're going to make our brush from this. So I'm going to open up the brushes panel, drag and drop this in. And what we want to do this time is create an art brush, because what we're going to do is apply this brush to every single one of these dashes. So I'll click OK. Now we want the brush to be applied to the line in this direction, so it's going in the wrong direction, and it will go in the wrong direction, so you will need to change this direction. We want it to scale proportionally because if we make these lines bigger, we want the bunting to be bigger, and if we want to recolor it, then we need to choose tint. So I'm going to click OK. Now for some reason I've got into isolation mode here, so I'm just going to press escape. It doesn't matter, it has no effect on what we're doing. So now I'm going to select over all of my lines, but let me get my brush piece out of the way for now. Let's select over all of these lines and let's now go and apply our art brush to the line. So here we have the bunting created. Now we're back to the same problem as we've had all along because the bunting here is bending. And the reason why it's bending at these ends and in the middle is that the line itself is bending. So we've got a whole lot of little lines here, all of which are bending, because you can see that they've got multiple little anchor points on them. If we zoom in, let's have a look. See how they've got little bends all the way along. Way too many anchor points. This one's straight. So is this one. It's only got two anchor points. It's only got two anchor points, it's a straight line, but all the others are sort of bending. So let's just go back and select over the line, or the lines, because every one of these is a line. And what we're going to do is we're going to straighten them out. And we do that with this command, Object, Path, Simplify. And what we want to do with this is we want to make our lines straight lines. So we're going to click on straight lines here, going to click on preview, and we're going to take this angle threshold all the way out to 180. And what that does is it turns every one of these lines into a straight line. And the result is that the bunting brush that's hanging off this line now becomes a perfect triangle. Let's have a look. This is original. You can see all these excess anchor points, and now we've only got two anchor points per line. And I'll click OK. And now we have our bunting hanging nicely off our line. Now you remember that we hid a line earlier so that we could use it as a way of hanging our bunting with something that was perhaps a little bit different color. So I'm going to make it visible and I'm going to select it and I'm going to adjust its color to, for example, some sort of red color so we can see it, and let's just make it a little bit wider stroke. So you can see that the bunting is now hanging off this red line. The bunting's in front of the red line, but it's easy enough to go and grab it in the layers palette and bring this bunting string, if you like, up above all the other pieces, in which case it's in front now of the triangles. Now any one of these triangles can be recolored by grabbing the line that it's associated with and then just recoloring it. Because we chose tints, we're able to do this. But what if you know ahead of time that you want different color bunting? Well, let's go and see an even easier process for creating multicolored bunting. The process of creating multicolor bunting is pretty much the same as what we've done, with just a few minor alterations. So first of all, I'm going to get a brand new document. I'm going to go and make my line that is 25 pixels long, 0 angle, and just click OK. It has a stroke, it has no fill. Now I'm going to create some additional copies of this line. So I'm actually going to use Effect, Distort and Transform. Effect, Distort and Transform, Transform. And what I want is, if I want 4 color bunting, for example, I'm going to add 3 copies of this. And I'm going to move them horizontally, something like 25 pixels or more. Now if I move them from this edge here, from this little box of 9 boxes, I'm selecting the one on the very far right in the middle, and if I set this to 25 pixels, then every one of these lines is butting up against the other one, but there's no overlap. If I want a bit of space, then I'm going to bring it out to 26 pixels, so I'm adding 1 pixel extra space, and click OK. Now let's go and expand this with Object Expand Appearance and then Object Ungroup. Now what that lets me do is separate these into the component 4 lines that we have here. So let's just zoom in a little bit. And what I'm going to do now is choose my bunting colors. So I actually have a color theme here that I grabbed from online, and it's Retro Pop. So I'm just going to add this to my swatches so I can use it. So I'm going to grab this first line here, and I'm going to make its stroke color pink. Now let's go to this one. Let's make it this green. Then we're going to do blue, and then we're going to do this darker green. Okay, so I've got 4 different colors now for my bunting. Well, this is going to become my brush. So I'm going to drag these into my brushes panel, and this is going to be the pattern brush. So we'll click OK. We don't have to worry about any of these things, but we do have to include some spacing because we want spacing between this piece and the next piece. And because it's 1 pixel and because our brush is 25 pixels long, that is 4%. So that should give us the right setting. We can check it in a minute to see. Now we're not going to do a colorization method because the colorization for our bunting has already been selected by the colors that we've put here in the brush. So I'm just going to click OK. So now let's go and make our line. So again, this process is similar to what we did last time, except this time we've got 4 lines in our pattern brush instead of 1. So I'm just going to make my line. I'm going to select my line. I'm going to duplicate it, edit copy, edit paste in place, just in case I want a second copy to add that sort of string that my bunting is going to be hanging from. This time let's hide the top one so we don't have to mess around with it later, and we'll just select the lower one. And we're going to apply our brush to it. So let's go and get our pattern brush. And there it is. So now that we've got our pattern brush applied to it, it's just going to check the spacing and it's out. So I'm going to reselect this. Let's click here and let's reduce the spacing. Let's see what 2% looks like. No, I still think it's wrong. I think it needs to be 1%. Yep, that's looking good, so I'll just click OK. So you just want to eyeball that until you get even spacing along. The spacing that you're looking for is between these 2 pieces where the pattern finishes the first time and then it repeats. So this is the sort of join, this is the connection or the space that you're looking to make sure is correct. So let's go and select all of this and let's expand it. Object Expand Appearance, Object Ungroup. Okay, now we're going to take all those pieces and we're going to apply our brush to it, but of course we're going to need a brush to do that with. So let's just go and get our Polygon Tool, click once, 3-sided figure, 50 pixels, click OK. Adjust the size of this, change the rotation. We want to set this to a black color, so I'm just going to press D for default, so it's black. And we'll switch the fill and stroke and remove the stroke. So now I'm just going to size it down. I'm going to duplicate it and put the second one on top of the first and then just squeeze it in because we don't need all of that. Make sure that the top one has no fill and no stroke. Select over the whole thing and make a brush from this. Drag and drop it in here. This time this is an art brush because we want 1 instance of this brush for each one of these lines. So we'll click OK. It needs to be scaled proportionately, so if the lines get bigger, so too does the triangle. It needs to be painted along the stroke in this way, otherwise it's going to look really, really horrible. And we want it to be tints. And so we'll click OK. Now all we need to do is to select this line and apply our brush to it. And as we do, you can see that the bunting has changed color. So according to what color that line was, this is the bunting color. So we solved one of our bunting problems by creating a multicolored line. So we have multicolored bunting. Of course, our bunting is all skew. These ones at the end are particularly bad. Well, we know the solution to that. We need to make these paths straight instead of curved. Object, path, simplify. Going down here, turning into straight lines. We're making sure that we have the angle threshold set to 180, and we'll just click OK. And there is our bunting. Now let's go back to our layers panel. We've got our path that we saved just sitting there, so let's select it. If we want to, we can make it a different color. Let's go here to the swatches panel. Let's make it this blue color. And we can increase the stroke width if we want to. So there's a solution to the problem of bunting triangles bending inappropriately when we create bunting. It's a little bit more of a complex solution, but once you've done it a couple of times, I promise you it's going to be very easy. And I really like this particular solution because it allows me to set the color of my bunting very, very quickly and easily, and means that I don't have to, as I would have with this one, go back and select each piece of bunting and do it manually. I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more video tutorials like this on my YouTube channel, and consider subscribing to my channel, and you'll be alerted when new videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com, where you'll find more tips, tricks and tutorials on a range of applications, including Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.